My name is Margaret Hale, and I remember the color of the ceiling tiles in that emergency room better than I remember my daughter's face. Beige with small brown flecks, arranged in a grid that seemed to mock the chaos happening in my chest. The pain had started behind my sternum during my evening tea, a crushing weight that spread down my left arm like liquid fire. I was 64 years old, and I'd lived long enough to know what a heart attack felt like. I'd been a nurse myself for 37 years before retirement, and I recognized the signs my body was sending. But knowledge doesn't make the fear any less real when you're lying on a gurney, watching monitors spike and hearing medical terms thrown around like weapons. "Mrs. Hale, we need to contact someone for you," the nurse said. Her name tag read Kelly Ramirez, and she had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Is there family we should call?" "My daughter," I whispered, my voice barely audible above the beeping machines. "Emily. She's my only child." Kelly squeezed my hand gently. "What's her number?" I recited Emily's phone number, the same number I'd memorized 20 years ago when she got her first cell phone, the same number I'd called countless times over the decades to check on her, to offer help, to simply hear her voice. The same number that, in my darkest moment, would deliver the cruelest blow of my life. I watched Kelly step away to make the call, holding my breath as much as my condition would allow. Through the thin curtain around my bed, I could hear fragments of her conversation. "Yes, this is Kelly Ramirez, a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. Your mother, Margaret Hale, has been admitted with a heart attack. Yes, it's serious. The doctor says the next few hours are critical." Then I heard something that made my blood run colder than the 4 fluids flowing into my veins. Kelly's voice became more insistent. "Ma'am, I need you to understand. Your mother may not make it through the night. The cardiologist is preparing for emergency surgery, but her condition is very unstable." And then I heard it. Even through the phone, even across the room, I heard my daughter's response clearly enough to memorize every inflection, every casual syllable that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "I can't come tonight. It's my mother-in-law's birthday party. I've been planning this for months, and I can't miss it for anything in the world. Tell my mother I'll visit tomorrow, if things work out." Kelly's face went pale. She looked at me, then back at the phone. "Mrs. Hale, your daughter specifically said she cannot miss this party, for anything. She said she might visit tomorrow if things work out." If things work out. As if my survival was a scheduling convenience rather than a matter of life and death. Kelly returned to my bedside, her professional composure barely masking her shock. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Hale. Sometimes they don't understand the gravity of the situation." But I understood perfectly. For Emily, her mother-in-law's birthday cake was more important than her own mother's last breath. The woman who had changed her diapers, paid for her college education, and loved her unconditionally for 35 years was worth less than a social obligation she couldn't bear to miss. I signed the consent forms for surgery with a shaking hand, my signature barely legible. As they wheeled me toward the cardiac unit, I made a decision that would change both our lives forever. Emily had shown me exactly where I stood in her priorities. She'd given me a gift, really, the clarity to see who she truly was beneath the daughter I thought I'd raised. The surgery took 4 hours. I survived, obviously, or I wouldn't be telling you this story. But something died in that operating room that night, something that could never be resurrected. It wasn't my heart. The surgeons fixed that with stents and medications. What died was my illusion that my daughter loved me more than her own convenience. When I woke up the next morning, there were flowers on my bedside table. Lilies, Emily's favorite, not mine. The card read, "Sorry I couldn't make it last night. Hope you're feeling better. Love, Emily. Hope you're feeling better." As if I'd had a minor headache instead of nearly dying alone while she ate birthday cake. I stared at those flowers for a long time, and for the first time in 35 years, I saw my daughter clearly. She was beautiful, charming, and utterly selfish. She was a woman who could prioritize a party over her mother's deathbed and then send flowers the next day, as if that made everything acceptable. That morning, lying in that hospital bed with machines monitoring my rebuilt heart, I made two mental phone calls. One to my bank, one to my lawyer. Some people might call what I was planning cruel. I called it educational. Emily was about to learn that actions have consequences, and that the woman she dismissed as an inconvenience was far from powerless. The old Margaret would have forgiven her, made excuses for her behavior, perhaps even apologized for the inconvenient timing of my heart attack. But the old Margaret had died on that operating table. What remained was someone harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous than my sweet daughter could ever imagine. I was going to teach Emily the most expensive lesson of her life, and I was going to do it legally, methodically, and with the kind of precision that comes from having nothing left to lose. She'd chosen her mother-in-law's birthday over my potential death. Now she'd learn what it felt like to lose everything she'd taken for granted. Some stories begin with love. This one begins with betrayal. The difference, I was about to discover, is that betrayal gives you permission to stop being merciful. 2 days after I was discharged, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and my address book, preparing to dismantle my daughter's future with the same care I'd once used to build it. The first call was to my bank's fraud prevention department. First National Security. This is Patricia speaking. Hello, Patricia. This is Margaret Hale, account holder since 1987. I need to implement immediate security measures on all my accounts. Of course, Mrs. Hale. What type of security measures are you looking to add? I'd spent 37 years as a nurse, dealing with medical emergencies, and I approached this conversation with the same clinical precision I'd once used to save lives. Now I was using it to save my assets. I want verbal passwords implemented on all accounts, different passwords for each account. I want dual authentication for any wire transfers over $500. I want alerts sent to my phone for any transaction over $100. And I want to revoke any existing authorizations for other parties to access my accounts. There was a brief pause. Mrs. Hale, that's quite comprehensive. May I ask if you've experienced any suspicious activity? I haven't yet, I said carefully, but I want to be prepared. What I didn't tell Patricia was that I'd done my homework. Over the past 2 days, I'd reviewed 3 years of bank statements with the thoroughness of a forensic accountant. I'd found the evidence I was looking for: small, recurring withdrawals that I hadn't authorized, a streaming service I didn't use, Zelle transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, cash withdrawals made from ATMs in Emily's neighborhood while I was visiting my sister last spring. My daughter had been testing me for years, taking small amounts she thought I wouldn't notice. The pattern was clear once I knew to look for it. Emily helped herself to my money whenever she thought I wasn't paying attention. I'll also need new debit cards for all accounts, I continued. Cancel the existing ones immediately. Certainly, Mrs. Hale. Your new cards will arrive in 7 to 10 business days. Emily had a spare card she'd borrowed 2 years ago during a shopping emergency. She'd promised to return it, but never had. Now it was useless plastic. My second call was to Thomas Greer, the attorney who'd handled my legal affairs for the past 15 years. Margaret, Thomas said warmly. How are you feeling? I heard about your hospital stay. I'm feeling clear-headed, Thomas. And I need to make some immediate changes to my estate planning. What kind of changes? I want to create a revocable living trust. I want to remove Emily as beneficiary from everything: my will, my life insurance, my retirement accounts. I want a no-contest clause that ensures if she tries to challenge any of this, she gets nothing. And I want it all done by tomorrow. The silence on Thomas's end stretched for several seconds. Margaret, these are significant changes. Are you certain you want to? Thomas, I'm 64 years old. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Can you do this, or do I need to find someone who can? Of course I can do it, but as your attorney, I have to ask, what's prompted this decision? I told him about the hospital, about Emily's choice to attend a birthday party instead of being with her potentially dying mother, about the flowers that arrived the next day as if they could resurrect maternal affection that had flatlined along with my heart monitor. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry, Thomas. Be thorough. I want this bulletproof. I want corporate trustees who can't be charmed or manipulated. I want beneficiaries who will actually deserve what they receive. And I want Emily to understand that actions have consequences. What about a medical power of attorney? She's currently listed as your healthcare proxy. Revoke it. Immediately. If Emily won't come to the hospital when I'm dying, she certainly shouldn't have the legal right to make decisions about my care. We spent the next hour going over details. Thomas would draft new documents naming a corporate trustee and changing all beneficiary designations. We'd establish a new will that specifically disinherited Emily with language that made the decision irrevocable. Any attempt to contest the will would result in her receiving absolutely nothing. Margaret, Thomas said as we finished, I have to ask, is there any possibility of reconciliation? Sometimes family members say things they don't mean during stressful situations. I thought about that for a moment. Had Emily been stressed when she chose a birthday party over my deathbed? Had she been confused about the severity of my condition? Thomas, the nurse specifically told Emily I might not survive the night. Emily's response was that she couldn't miss her mother-in-law's birthday party for anything in the world. Does that sound like someone who is confused about the severity of the situation? No, he said quietly. It doesn't. Then you have your answer. After I hung up, I made one more call to Colin Anders, a retired bank investigator Thomas had recommended for forensic accounting work. If Emily had been stealing from me systematically, I wanted documentation that would hold up in court. Colin's voice was gravelly and professional. Mrs. Hale, Thomas briefed me on your situation. I can have a preliminary analysis of your accounts completed within a week. If there's systematic fraud, we'll find it. What exactly will you be looking for? Unauthorized access patterns, suspicious timing of transactions, IP address tracking for online banking, device fingerprints for mobile banking apps. If someone's been accessing your accounts without permission, they've left digital breadcrumbs. We just have to follow them. That afternoon, I sat in my garden and thought about the irony of it all. Emily had spent years positioning herself as my loving daughter, my devoted caregiver, my eventual inheritor. She'd attended family gatherings, remembered my birthday with expensive gifts, and made sure everyone saw what a wonderful daughter she was. But when the moment came that truly mattered, when her mother was potentially drawing her last breath, she'd shown her true priorities. Everything else had been performance. The real Emily was the woman who couldn't be bothered to leave a birthday party even when her mother might die alone. Well, if Emily wanted to prioritize other people over her mother, she was about to learn what it felt like to be deprioritized herself. Legally, methodically, and completely. I watered my roses and planned the systematic dismantling of my daughter's expectations. Some people plant gardens to create beauty. I was planting legal landmines to create justice. The old Margaret would have felt guilty about what she was planning. The new Margaret felt nothing but surgical precision. Emily had taught me that family loyalty was conditional. Now I was going to teach her that inheritance was even more conditional than she'd imagined. Revenge without evidence is just anger. Evidence without planning is just frustration. What I needed was both, methodically assembled and legally unassailable. Colin Anders arrived at my house exactly on time, carrying a briefcase that looked like it had seen decades of financial crime scenes. He was a thin man with steel-gray hair and the kind of eyes that missed nothing, exactly what I needed. Mrs. Hale, I've already started the preliminary review of your account access logs. The patterns are illuminating. He spread printouts across my dining room table like a detective building a murder case. Your daughter has been accessing your online banking consistently for approximately 18 months, always during times when you were away from home or incapacitated. Colin pointed to a timeline he'd created. Here, 3 unauthorized Zelle transfers during your hospital stay for gallbladder surgery last year. Here, cash withdrawals from ATMs near her residence while you were visiting your sister in Florida. Here, online bill pay authorizations for services you've never used, all set up during the week you had pneumonia and were housebound. I studied the documents with the same attention I'd once given to patient charts. The pattern was clear. Emily viewed my incapacitation as opportunity. Every time I was vulnerable, she helped herself to what was mine. How much are we talking about, Colin? Conservatively, about $12,000 over 18 months. But that's just the direct theft. The unauthorized subscriptions and services add another $3,000. $15,000. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. She's been stealing $15,000 from her potentially dying mother. There's more, Mrs. Hale. I found evidence she's been using your personal information to open credit monitoring services and subscription accounts. She has your social security number, your mother's maiden name, and access to enough personal information to potentially commit identity theft. Colin opened another folder. I also need to tell you about this. He showed me a credit report inquiry from 6 months ago. Someone used your information to check your credit score. The inquiry came from her IP address. Why would she need my credit score? People usually check credit scores when they're planning to apply for loans using that person's information, or when they're assessing someone's overall financial health for other purposes. Other purposes. Like determining how much money her mother had available to steal. Colin, I need you to set up monitoring on all my accounts. But I also need you to set up something else, a trap. His eyebrows rose slightly. What kind of trap? I want to open a new checking account with obvious vulnerabilities. Old-style online banking, simple passwords, the kind of access Emily's gotten used to. But I want the account monitored 24 hours a day. The moment she tries to access it or transfer money, I want alerts sent to both of us and to the police. Colin smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. A honeypot account. Smart. We'll set it up with enough money to make it tempting, maybe $5,000, but not enough to constitute a major loss if something goes wrong. How long do you think it will take her to find it? Based on her access patterns? She's checking your accounts every 2 to 3 weeks. I'd estimate she'll discover it within a month and try to access it within 6 weeks. That evening, I called my neighbor Janice Miller. Janice was 72, sharp as a tack, and had the best view of my driveway from her kitchen window. Janice, I need to ask you about something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course, Margaret. What's wrong? Over the past year or so, have you seen Emily at my house when I wasn't home? There was a long pause. Margaret, I didn't want to say anything because I thought maybe you'd given her permission. Just tell me what you saw. 3 or 4 times, I saw her car in your driveway when your car wasn't there. Once, I saw her carrying a shoebox to her car. Another time, she was loading what looked like books or papers into her trunk. I assumed you'd asked her to pick things up for you. My grandmother's jewelry box was missing from my bedroom. I'd noticed it the week before, but assumed I'd misplaced it during my recovery. I'd also noticed that some of my important papers seemed to have been moved around in my desk drawer. Did you notice what times of day these visits occurred? Always during the week, usually mid-morning, when most people would be at work. But when a retired nurse would normally be home. Unless that retired nurse was in the hospital or visiting family or sick with pneumonia. Janice, if I asked you to testify about what you saw, would you be willing to do that? Testify? Margaret, what's going on? I'm building a case against someone who's been stealing from me. Someone who's been taking advantage of my health problems to rob me blind. Oh my God. Emily. Yes. That little. Janice's voice hardened. Yes, Margaret. If you need me to testify, I'll do it. I saw what I saw, and I'll swear to it in court. The next morning, I installed a comprehensive security system. Cameras covering every entrance, motion detectors, a monitored alarm system. If Emily wanted to continue her unauthorized visits, she'd be doing it on film. I also did something else. I left certain items in strategic locations. My old checkbook in the desk drawer where she'd expect it, but with an account that had been closed. Blank checks on the kitchen counter, but for accounts that no longer existed. Legal documents visible in my home office, but copies of old, superseded versions. If Emily broke into my house looking for financial information or valuable items, she'd find exactly what I wanted her to find: evidence of her criminal intent, captured on high-definition video. That afternoon, Thomas called with news that the legal restructuring was complete. Margaret, everything you requested has been executed and recorded. Emily is no longer your beneficiary for anything. The no contest clause is ironclad. If she tries to challenge this, she gets nothing. What about the medical power of attorney? Revoked and replaced. Your new healthcare proxy is a professional patient advocate who will follow your wishes, not their own agenda. Good. Now we wait. Margaret, are you sure about this path? Once criminal charges are filed, there's no going back. I thought about Emily's voice on the phone that night. I can't miss it for anything in the world. I thought about her choosing birthday cake over her mother's last breath. I thought about $15,000 stolen during my moments of greatest vulnerability. Thomas, she made her choices. Now she gets to live with the consequences. Some mothers would have felt guilt about setting traps for their own daughter. Some mothers would have agonized over the decision to disinherit their only child. But I wasn't some mothers. I was a mother who nearly died alone while her daughter ate cake. I was a mother who'd been systematically robbed by the person who should have been protecting her. And I was a mother who was about to teach her daughter that exploitation is a crime, regardless of DNA. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for Emily to walk into it. Before we continue with Margaret's story of justice, I want to share something crucial with you. If you've ever been told you're too old to start over, let me tell you, that's a lie. Your story isn't over, and you still have chapters left to write. Our best-selling book, Reclaiming Your Peace After Pain, is filled with simple, powerful steps to help you heal, rebuild, and fall in love with life again. Click the link in the description box and start your new beginning today. Margaret's journey shows us that betrayal can become your greatest teacher, and revenge, when done legally and methodically, can become your greatest victory. Like this video if you're inspired by Margaret's refusal to be anyone's victim. Subscribe for more stories of people who fought back against family exploitation, and hit that notification bell because Margaret's legal trap is about to spring in the most satisfying way possible. She arrived on a Tuesday morning, carrying lilies and wearing the kind of smile that had gotten her out of trouble since she was 5 years old. I watched her through my new security cameras as she approached the front door, noting how she checked the windows first. Old habit from her unauthorized visits, I suppose. Emily looked perfect as always. Her blonde hair was styled in loose waves, her makeup flawless, her designer handbag coordinated with shoes that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. At 35, she'd maintained the kind of beauty that opened doors and closed questions. But beauty had never made someone trustworthy, and I was done being charmed by her appearance. I opened the door before she could knock, my own smile carefully neutral. "Hello, Emily." "Mom." She stepped forward for a hug that I accepted, but didn't return. The gesture felt practiced, performative. "How are you feeling? You look wonderful for someone who just had a heart attack." Wonderful for someone who just had a heart attack. Even her concern came with qualifiers. I'm recovering well. Thank you. Come in. She followed me into the living room, and I watched her eyes scan the space, looking for changes, assessing, cataloging. Emily had always been observant when it served her purposes. I brought you lilies, she said, setting the vase on my coffee table. Your favorites. They weren't my favorites. They were hers. But I thanked her anyway and offered to make tea, just as I'd done for 35 years when Emily needed something from me. As I prepared the tea, Emily wandered through my house with the casual familiarity of someone who considered it partly hers. I heard her footsteps on the hardwood, heard drawers opening and closing quietly in my home office. The security cameras were recording everything, and my audio recording system was capturing every sound. When I returned with the tea service, Emily was seated on my sofa, looking appropriately contrite. Mom, I need to apologize for the other night. I know you were scared, and I should have come to the hospital immediately. I settled into my chair and poured tea, taking my time. Tell me about Lillian's birthday party. Was it everything you'd hoped? Emily blinked, clearly not expecting that particular response. It was nice, but I kept thinking about you. I felt terrible the whole time. Terrible enough to leave? Well, no, but not terrible enough to actually come see your potentially dying mother. A flash of irritation crossed her face before she smoothed it away. Mom, you know I would have come if it had been really serious. The doctors said you were stable. That was a lie. I'd spoken with Nurse Kelly the day before to clarify exactly what had been communicated to Emily. Kelly had been explicit about the severity of my condition and the uncertainty of my survival. Emily, the nurse told you I might not make it through the night. How much more serious could it have been? She shifted uncomfortably. I guess I just thought. I mean, you're strong, Mom. You've always been so strong. I knew you'd pull through. Another lie, delivered with the same casual confidence she'd always used to rewrite reality to suit her needs. So you chose to stay at the party because you were confident I'd survive? I chose to stay because I'd made a commitment to Lillian. Family obligations are important, Mom. I thought you'd understand that. Family obligations. I set down my teacup with deliberate care. You're absolutely right, Emily. Family obligations are important. Speaking of which, I've been reviewing my finances since the hospital stay, and I've noticed some irregularities. I watched her face carefully. There, a micro-expression of panic that she quickly suppressed. What kind of irregularities? Transactions I don't remember authorizing. Zelle transfers to accounts I don't recognize. Cash withdrawals from ATMs I've never used. It's quite concerning. Emily's smile never wavered, but I saw her hand tremble slightly as she reached for her teacup. That does sound concerning. Maybe someone's been using your information fraudulently? Maybe. Or maybe someone I trusted has been helping themselves to my accounts during times when I was too sick or distracted to notice. The silence stretched between us like a tightening wire. Mom, are you suggesting that I'm not suggesting anything, Emily. I'm simply stating facts. Someone has been accessing my accounts without permission. Someone who knows my personal information and my banking habits. Someone who seems to know exactly when I'm too incapacitated to monitor my finances. Emily stood up abruptly. I can't believe you'd accuse me of stealing from you. After everything I've done for this family, after all the times I've helped you with technology and banking. Helped me with technology and banking. Interesting way to describe theft. Emily, when exactly have you helped me with banking? Well, I've shown you how to use the mobile app, and I've helped you set up online bill pay. You mean you've helped yourself to my login information while pretending to teach me? Her face flushed red.
How dare you?
I'm your daughter, not some criminal. Those aren't mutually exclusive categories, Emily. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I don't have to listen to this. When you're ready to apologize for these horrible accusations, you can call me. Emily, before you leave, I have something to tell you. She turned back, her face a mask of righteous indignation. I've made some changes to my estate planning. You're no longer my beneficiary for anything, my will, my life insurance, my retirement accounts. I've also revoked your medical power of attorney. The color drained from her face. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. I've learned that family obligations only matter to people who actually honor them. Mom, you're overreacting. You're emotional because of the heart attack. I'm clear-headed for the first time in years. You showed me exactly where I stand in your priorities, Emily. Now I'm showing you where you stand in mine. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something calculating flicker in her eyes. You'll change your mind, she said finally. When you realize how much you need me, you'll change everything back. I don't think I will. After she left, I sat in my living room and reviewed the security footage on my tablet. I watched Emily examining my office, saw her open desk drawers and shuffle through papers. I saw her take photographs of documents with her phone. But most importantly, I watched her take a small notebook from her purse and write down information she found in my desk, information like account numbers and the location of my safe. The trap was working perfectly. Emily thought she was gathering intelligence for future theft. Instead, she was creating evidence for her future prosecution. That evening, Colin called with an update. Mrs. Hale, your daughter accessed your online banking at 3:17 p.m. today, about an hour after she left your house. She spent 12 minutes reviewing account balances and transaction history. Did she try to move any money? Not yet. But she did something interesting. She attempted to add her email address to your account alert system. The bank's security protocols blocked the attempt and flagged it as suspicious.
Perfect.
Emily was escalating, getting desperate, making mistakes. Colin, how long before she tries something more aggressive? Based on her behavioral pattern, I'd say within 2 weeks. The disinheritance news will make her feel desperate, and desperate people make poor decisions. I hung up the phone and poured myself a glass of wine. Outside my window, the sun was setting over the garden I'd cultivated for 20 years. Emily had always admired this house, had often commented about how she looked forward to inheriting it someday. She'd assumed that my love for her guaranteed her financial future. She'd counted on maternal affection to override maternal judgment. She'd been wrong on both counts. Some daughters earn their inheritance through love, loyalty, and care. Emily had tried to earn hers through exploitation and abandonment. The difference between those two approaches was about to become very expensive for her to learn. Thomas Greer's law office smelled like leather and old money, exactly the kind of place where important documents went to become unbreakable truths. I sat across from his mahogany desk, watching him prepare the papers that would formalize Emily's complete disinheritance. Margaret, these documents are ironclad, Thomas said, sliding the papers across to me. The revocation of power of attorney is effective immediately and has been recorded with the county clerk. The new trust documents explicitly exclude Emily as a beneficiary, and the no contest clause ensures that any attempt to challenge her decisions will result in her receiving absolutely nothing. I reviewed each page carefully, my nurse's training making me naturally meticulous about details that could save or destroy lives. These documents would destroy Emily's expectations, but they might save my own financial life. What about the transfer on death deed for the house? Executed and recorded. Upon your death, the property transfers directly to the charitable trust we established. Emily has no claim to it whatsoever. I signed each document with the same steady hand I'd once used to administer life-saving medications. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using my medical training to perform surgery on my family tree, cutting away the diseased branch that had been poisoning the whole system. Thomas, I need you to send copies of the revocation documents to Emily via certified mail. I want her to receive formal notification that she no longer has any legal authority over my affairs. Of course. But Margaret, you should be prepared for her reaction. This is going to come as a shock. Good. Shock can be educational. My next stop was First National Bank, where I met with Patricia from the fraud department and her supervisor, Michael Torres. Mrs. Hale, we've completed the security upgrades you requested, Patricia said. All your existing accounts now require verbal passwords and dual authentication for any transfers over $500. We've also set up the monitoring account as you requested. Michael leaned forward. I have to ask, Mrs. Hale, are you expecting someone to attempt unauthorized access to your accounts? I'm not expecting it, Michael. I'm planning for it. Someone close to me has been systematically stealing from my accounts for over a year. I have evidence of unauthorized access, fraudulent transfers, and identity theft. When they make their next move, I want them caught red-handed. Have you contacted law enforcement? I've been building a case with the help of a forensic accountant. When we have enough evidence to guarantee conviction, I'll involve the police. Until then, I need your help to catch them in the act. Patricia pulled out a folder. The monitoring account is set up with $5,000 and basic online banking access. It's designed to look like a standard checking account you might use for everyday expenses. The moment someone tries to access it or transfer funds, alerts will be sent to you, me, and Detective Sarah Morrison at the police department. Detective Morrison is already involved? Michael nodded. We've worked with her on several financial fraud cases. She's agreed to coordinate with us if and when your suspect makes their move.
Perfect.
Emily thought she was dealing with her naive, trusting mother. Instead, she was walking into a carefully orchestrated trap involving bank security, forensic accounting, and law enforcement. That afternoon, I had one more meeting with Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a geriatric psychiatrist who specialized in elder abuse cases. Mrs. Hale, I want to make sure you understand what you're dealing with, Dr. Walsh said. Financial exploitation of elderly parents by their adult children is more common than people realize. It often escalates over time, especially when the perpetrator feels entitled to their parents' assets. What should I expect as this situation develops? Your daughter will likely become increasingly desperate as she realizes her access to your money has been cut off. She may become manipulative, trying to guilt you into reversing your decisions. She may recruit other family members to pressure you. And if she's been stealing from you systematically, she may attempt more aggressive financial fraud to replace the income stream she's lost. You mean she'll try to steal more? Almost certainly. And when she does, she'll likely make mistakes that will provide law enforcement with clear evidence of criminal intent. That evening, I received a call from Emily's husband, David. His voice was tight with anger. Margaret, what the hell are you doing? Emily came home crying because you've accused her of stealing and disinherited her completely. This is insane. Hello, David. How was Lillian's birthday party? A pause. What does that have to do with anything? Everything. Your wife chose to stay at that party instead of being with her potentially dying mother. That choice revealed her true priorities, and I've adjusted my estate planning accordingly. You can't punish Emily forever because she made one mistake. It wasn't one mistake, David. It was a pattern of behavior that culminated in abandoning me during a life-threatening medical emergency. And now I've discovered she's been stealing from me for over a year. That's ridiculous. Emily would never. David, I have bank records, digital forensics, and witness testimony. Your wife has been systematically robbing me during my moments of greatest vulnerability. The evidence is overwhelming. I don't believe that. Believe what you want, David. The courts will be interested in facts, not belief. He hung up on me, which I took as confirmation that Emily had shared the details of our conversation with him.
Good.
Let them both understand that this wasn't an emotional overreaction. It was a calculated response to calculated theft. Colin called me that evening with an update. Mrs. Hale, your daughter attempted to access your main checking account twice today, once at 2 p.m. and again at 6 p.m. Both attempts were blocked by the new security protocols. She also tried to call the bank's customer service line using your social security number to request account information, but they flagged the call as suspicious because the voice didn't match your voice print on file. She's getting desperate.
Very.
And desperate people make mistakes. I expect she'll try something more aggressive within the next few days. I spent that evening organizing my evidence files. Bank statements showing unauthorized transactions. Digital forensics proving Emily's devices had accessed my accounts. Witness statements from Janice about Emily's unauthorized visits to my house. Medical records from the hospital showing the severity of my heart attack and Emily's refusal to come. Each piece of evidence was dated, notarized, and filed in chronological order. When the time came to present this case to a prosecutor, I wanted everything to be beyond reproach. The certified mail from Thomas arrived at Emily's house the next morning. I knew because my security system showed her car pulling into my driveway at 11:23 a.m., and she was out of the vehicle before it had completely stopped moving. She pounded on my door with enough force to rattle the frame.
Mom.
Open this door right now. I opened it calmly, noting that the cameras were recording everything. Hello, Emily. You seem upset. She waved the certified mail envelope in my face. What is this? What is this legal garbage about revoking my power of attorney? It's exactly what it says. You no longer have any legal authority over my affairs. You can't do this. I'm your only daughter. Being someone's daughter doesn't grant you the right to steal from them or abandon them when they're dying. Emily's face was flushed red, her perfect composure completely shattered. I didn't abandon you. I made one mistake, and you're destroying our entire relationship over it. One mistake? Emily, you've been stealing from my bank accounts for over a year. You've been using my personal information to open unauthorized services. You've been accessing my home without permission and taking items that don't belong to you. This isn't one mistake. This is a sustained criminal enterprise. That's not true. I've never stolen anything from you. I stepped aside and gestured toward my living room. Emily, would you like to come in and discuss this like adults? She pushed past me, her expensive heels clicking angrily on my hardwood floors. What she didn't know was that by entering my house in her current agitated state, she was about to provide me with even more evidence. Mom, this is ridiculous. You're paranoid and confused because of the heart attack. You need to reverse all these legal changes before you do permanent damage to our family. Our family? Emily, where was our family when I was dying in the hospital? I was honoring a commitment. That's what responsible adults do. Responsible adults don't steal $15,000 from their mother's bank accounts. She went very still. What did you say?
$15,000, Emily.
That's what my forensic accountant calculated you've stolen from me over the past 18 months. Would you like to see the documentation? I pulled out Colin's report and spread it across my coffee table. Emily stared at the evidence of her own crimes, her face cycling through shock, denial, and finally, calculation. You hired a forensic accountant? You hired someone to investigate your own daughter. I hired someone to investigate systematic theft from my accounts. The fact that the thief turned out to be my daughter is unfortunate, but it doesn't change the evidence. Emily sank onto my sofa, her hands shaking. Mom, if I took some money, it was only because I knew you'd want to help if I asked. I was saving you the awkwardness of having to say no. If I took some money, the conditional admission that confirmed everything I suspected. So you stole from me to save me from the awkwardness of refusing to give you money? I didn't steal. I borrowed. I was going to pay it back. When, Emily? When exactly were you planning to pay back $15,000? She couldn't answer, because we both knew she'd never intended to pay back anything. Emily had viewed my bank accounts as her personal emergency fund, available whenever she felt entitled to access them. Mom, please.
I'm sorry.
I'll pay it all back, I promise. Just don't involve lawyers and accountants, and please don't destroy our relationship over money. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She was still beautiful, still charming, still able to summon tears when they served her purposes. But I saw her clearly now. Emily was a thief who happened to share my DNA, nothing more and nothing less. Emily, our relationship was destroyed the night you chose birthday cake over your dying mother. Everything since then has just been documentation. She stood up abruptly.
Fine.
If you want to play hardball, we'll play hardball. I'll contest the will. I'll have you declared incompetent. I'll prove you're too old and confused to make rational decisions about your estate. I smiled for the first time during her visit. Emily, please do. Contest the will. Have me declared incompetent. Fight this in court. I encourage you to pursue every legal option available to you. She looked confused by my response. Why would you want me to contest the will? Because, sweetheart, I've included a no contest clause. The moment you challenge any aspect of my estate planning, you're automatically disinherited from everything. You'll go from getting nothing to being legally prohibited from ever getting anything. Please, by all means, contest the will. The color drained from her face as she realized the trap I'd set for her. Any legal challenge she mounted would only confirm her disinheritance. You planned this, she whispered. You planned all of this. I plan to protect myself from someone who's been systematically exploiting me. If that someone happens to be my daughter, then so be it. Emily gathered her purse and headed for the door. This isn't over, Mom. I'll find a way to fight this. Emily, one more thing. She turned back, her face a mask of barely controlled rage. The next time you access my bank accounts without authorization, or attempt to use my personal information for any purpose, or enter my house without permission, you'll be arrested. The police are already involved, and they're monitoring the situation. Don't make this worse for yourself than it already is. After she left, I sat in my living room and reviewed the security footage of her visit. I watched her admit to taking money from my accounts. I listened to her threaten to contest the will and have me declared incompetent. I saw her fury when she realized the legal trap I'd constructed. Most importantly, I had recorded evidence of her admitting to financial theft and making threats against my legal decisions. Colin called 20 minutes later. Mrs. Hale, your daughter just attempted to access the monitoring account. She tried to transfer the entire $5,000 balance to an account registered under her husband's name. Did the transfer go through? No, but she tried 3 times. Each attempt has been documented and flagged by bank security. Detective Morrison has been notified.
Perfect.
Emily had just provided law enforcement with clear evidence of attempted financial fraud, committed in desperation and caught in real time. The paper wall I'd constructed around my assets was working exactly as designed. Emily couldn't access my money, couldn't challenge my legal decisions without penalty, and couldn't manipulate me into reversing course. But more importantly, her attempts to circumvent my protection had created a trail of evidence that would soon land her in handcuffs. Some daughters learn from their mistakes. Others double down on them until they become criminal charges. Emily had just chosen her path. The call came at 10:42 on a Wednesday morning. I was reading in my garden, enjoying the autumn sunshine, when my phone buzzed with Detective Morrison's number. Mrs. Hale, your daughter is at First National Bank right now, attempting to wire $15,000 from the monitoring account. Can you get here in 20 minutes? I set down my book and checked my appearance in the hallway mirror. Pearl earrings, navy cardigan, the kind of understated elegance that made people take me seriously. Today, I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a respectable citizen whose trust had been systematically violated by someone who should have protected her. I'll be there in 15 minutes, detective. I drove to the bank with the calm precision of someone who had spent months planning this moment. Every detail had been orchestrated, every legal requirement satisfied, every piece of evidence documented and verified. Emily thought she was pulling off a desperate heist. In reality, she was walking into a trap that had been waiting for her since the night she chose birthday cake over my deathbed. I parked across the street from the bank and called Detective Morrison. I'm here, detective. What's the situation? Your daughter is inside with a forged power of attorney document, trying to convince the branch manager to authorize a wire transfer. The document was professionally created. It looks legitimate at first glance. But you know it's forged because I revoked her power of attorney weeks ago.
Exactly.
The revocation is on file with the county clerk and was sent to the bank's legal department. Your daughter is attempting to use a legal document she knows has been invalidated. That's criminal fraud. I could see Emily through the bank's large windows. She was seated at a desk, gesturing animatedly at a middle-aged man in a suit, probably the branch manager. She looked confident, entitled, absolutely certain that her combination of charm and forged paperwork would get her what she wanted. She had no idea that bank security cameras were recording everything, that the FBI had been notified about potential financial fraud, and that her mother was sitting across the street watching her commit multiple felonies in real time. Detective, what happens next? The bank manager is going to tell your daughter that the transfer requires additional verification. When she insists on proceeding despite the obvious problems with her documentation, we'll have clear evidence of criminal intent. Then I'll make the arrest. Will I need to testify? Almost certainly. This is going to trial, Mrs. Hale. Your daughter is facing multiple federal charges: wire fraud, identity theft, elder financial abuse, and forgery. The evidence is overwhelming, but we'll need you to establish the pattern of unauthorized access and explain the timeline of events. Through the bank windows, I watched Emily's demeanor change. The branch manager had obviously delivered unwelcome news because her posture went from confident to aggressive. She leaned forward, pointing at documents, her voice rising enough that other customers were starting to notice. She's not taking no for an answer, I told Detective Morrison.
Good.
The more she insists on proceeding with fraudulent documents, the stronger our case becomes. 5 minutes later, Detective Morrison and 2 uniformed officers entered the bank. I watched Emily's face change from irritation to confusion to dawning horror as she realized what was happening. The detective approached Emily's table and spoke quietly to the branch manager, who nodded and stepped away. Then Detective Morrison sat down across from my daughter and introduced herself. I couldn't hear the conversation through the bank's windows, but I could read Emily's body language perfectly. Shock, denial, indignation, panic. All the stages of someone whose carefully constructed lies were crumbling in real time. Detective Morrison held up evidence bags, the forged power of attorney, Emily's identification, the wire transfer request. Each item was photographed and documented while Emily sat frozen in her chair. Then Detective Morrison stood up and said something that made Emily's face go white. A moment later, one of the uniformed officers stepped forward with handcuffs. Mrs. Emily Hale, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, elder financial abuse, and forgery. You have the right to remain silent. Emily's mouth was moving, but I couldn't tell if she was speaking or just gasping. Her perfect blonde hair fell across her face as the officer guided her hands behind her back. Her expensive handbag fell to the floor, spilling contents across the bank's marble tiles. Other customers were staring now, some taking photos with their phones. Emily's public humiliation was complete. Arrested in broad daylight, led away in handcuffs, her criminal behavior exposed for everyone to see. As they escorted her toward the door, Emily looked through the bank's windows and saw me sitting in my car across the street. Our eyes met for just a moment, and I saw the exact instant she understood that I had orchestrated everything. Her mother, the woman she'd dismissed as too old and confused to protect herself, had outmaneuvered her completely. The woman she'd tried to exploit had instead engineered her arrest and prosecution. I didn't smile or wave or show any reaction at all. I simply watched as the daughter who'd abandoned me in my moment of greatest need was led away to face the consequences of systematic financial abuse. Detective Morrison called me as Emily was being loaded into the police car. "Mrs. Hale, we'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement. The federal prosecutor will want to interview you about the pattern of unauthorized access and theft." "Of course. Detective, what charges is Emily facing exactly?" "Wire fraud carries up to 20 years in federal prison. Identity theft is another 15. Elder financial abuse is a state felony with a mandatory minimum of 2 years. The forgery charges add another 5 years. If convicted on all counts, she's looking at decades in prison." Decades in prison. The daughter who'd been too busy for her dying mother would have plenty of time to think about her priorities while serving a federal sentence. What about bail? Given the systematic nature of the fraud and the flight risk assessment, I expect the judge will set bail quite high. Your daughter's going to be in custody for a while. I drove home slowly, taking the long way through the neighborhoods where Emily had once lived, worked, and socialized. By tomorrow, everyone would know about her arrest. The local newspaper would run the story. Her friends would see her mugshot on social media. Her husband's family would learn that their daughter-in-law was a federal criminal. Emily had always cared deeply about her reputation, her social standing, her appearance of success and respectability. All of that was gone now, destroyed in the span of one morning at a bank where she'd tried to steal from the mother she'd abandoned. That evening, David called me. His voice was hollow, defeated. "Margaret, they arrested Emily at the bank today. She's in federal custody." "I know. You planned this, didn't you? You set her up." I protected myself from someone who'd been systematically stealing from me. The fact that it was my daughter doesn't change the criminal nature of her actions. She's the mother of your grandchildren, Margaret. How could you do this to them? David, Emily did this to herself and to her children. I simply ensured that her crimes had consequences. The bail hearing is tomorrow. Will you help us pay?
No.
Margaret, please. She made mistakes, but she doesn't deserve to rot in jail. She made choices, David. Deliberate, calculated choices to exploit my health problems and steal my money. Now she gets to live with the results of those choices. What about the grandchildren? They need their mother. I thought about Emma and Noah, 8 and 10 years old, who would grow up knowing their mother was a convicted felon. It was tragic, but their tragedy had been authored by Emily's greed, not my justice. David, Emily should have thought about her children before she decided to commit federal crimes. That responsibility was hers, not mine. After I hung up, I sat in my living room and looked at the family photos I'd been meaning to update. Pictures of Emily's graduations, her wedding, holidays where she'd smiled and hugged me and played the role of the loving daughter. I took down every photo that included Emily and stored them in a box in my closet. The woman in those pictures had been an illusion, a performance designed to maintain access to my bank accounts and my eventual inheritance. The real Emily was the person who'd been arrested today, a thief who'd exploited her mother's love and vulnerability for 18 months, who'd abandoned her dying mother for a birthday party, and who'd responded to being cut off from her victim by committing increasingly serious crimes. I replaced Emily's photos with pictures of my garden, my volunteer work at the literacy center, my book club friends. Images of a life that was mine alone, free from exploitation and manipulation. Some mothers would have felt guilty about their daughter's arrest. Some mothers would have blamed themselves for not being understanding enough, forgiving enough, patient enough. But I wasn't some mothers. I was a mother who'd survived both a heart attack and a daughter's betrayal. I was a mother who'd chosen legal justice over maternal enablement. And I was a mother who was finally free. The first call came from David at 6 a.m. the morning after Emily's arrest. His voice was tight with desperation and barely controlled anger. Margaret, you have to drop the charges. Emily's been in jail all night, and the bail hearing isn't until this afternoon. This is insane. She's your own daughter. I was already awake, having slept better than I had in months. There's something deeply restful about knowing that the person who's been systematically exploiting you is no longer free to continue their crimes. David, I can't drop federal charges. Once the FBI takes over a case involving wire fraud and elder abuse, it's out of my hands. Emily will have to answer to the federal prosecutor now. But you could tell them you don't want to press charges, that it was all a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. Emily systematically stole $15,000 from my accounts and then attempted to commit wire fraud using forged legal documents. Those are facts, not misunderstandings. The second call came from Lillian Carter, Emily's mother-in-law, the woman whose birthday party had been more important than my deathbed. Margaret, I don't understand how you could do this to Emily. She made one little mistake, and you're destroying her entire life. One little mistake. I almost laughed. Lillian, Emily committed multiple felonies over an 18-month period. The little mistake was getting caught. But she's always been such a good daughter to you. She talks about you all the time, says how much she loves and worries about you. Then why didn't she come to the hospital when I was dying? Silence on the other end of the line. Lillian, your birthday party was more important to Emily than her mother's life. That tells you everything you need to know about her priorities. The third call was from Emily's high school friend, Rebecca Walsh, who'd apparently been recruited to the campaign to save Emily from the consequences of her own actions. Mrs. Hale, I know Emily made some poor choices, but federal prison? Don't you think that's excessive for a family dispute? Rebecca, this isn't a family dispute. This is a criminal prosecution. Emily committed wire fraud, identity theft, elder financial abuse, and forgery. Those are serious crimes with serious penalties. But you're her mother. Surely you can find it in your heart to forgive her. Forgiveness and accountability aren't mutually exclusive, Rebecca. I can forgive Emily, while still ensuring she faces justice for her crimes. By mid-morning, my phone was ringing constantly. Friends of Emily's, neighbors who'd heard about the arrest, even my own book club members who thought I was being too harsh. Everyone seemed to have an opinion about my decision to prosecute my own daughter. I stopped answering the phone and let everything go to voicemail. Let them talk. Let them judge. Let them think I was a cruel, vindictive mother who destroyed her daughter's life over money. The truth was simpler. I was a mother who'd finally stopped enabling her daughter's criminal behavior. That afternoon, I met with Assistant Federal Prosecutor Rachel Cooper at the U.S. Attorney's Office. Rachel was a woman about Emily's age, but where Emily projected entitled charm, Rachel radiated competent authority. Mrs. Hale, I want you to understand that this is a strong case. Your daughter left an extensive digital trail, and her attempt to use forged documents at the bank gave us clear evidence of criminal intent. What's the timeline for prosecution? The grand jury will meet next week to consider the indictment. Based on the evidence, I expect they'll indict on all charges. After that, we'll proceed to trial unless your daughter decides to accept a plea agreement. What kind of plea agreement? Given the strength of our case, I'd offer 5 years in federal prison, full restitution of the stolen funds, and 10 years of supervised probation. If she takes it to trial and loses, she's looking at 15 to 20 years. 15 to 20 years. The daughter, who'd been too busy for her dying mother, would spend the next 2 decades in federal prison. Mrs. Hale, I have to ask, are you prepared for the emotional difficulty of testifying against your own daughter? Rachel, my daughter chose to exploit my health problems to steal from me systematically. She abandoned me during a life-threatening medical emergency. She forged legal documents to commit wire fraud. The emotional difficulty was watching someone I loved transform into someone I couldn't trust. That evening, Emily's defense attorney called me. His name was Marcus Webb, and his voice carried the practiced smoothness of someone who specialized in making criminal behavior sound like unfortunate misunderstandings. Mrs. Hale, I'm representing your daughter in this matter. I'd like to discuss the possibility of resolving this situation without a trial. What did you have in mind, Mr. Webb? Emily acknowledges that she made some poor financial decisions. She's prepared to pay full restitution and attend financial counseling. In exchange, perhaps you could speak with the prosecutor about reducing the charges. Poor financial decisions. Not theft. Not fraud. Not abandoning her dying mother. Just poor decisions. Mr. Webb, did Emily tell you about the night I had my heart attack? I don't see how that's relevant to the financial charges. It's relevant because it establishes Emily's character and her priorities. When the hospital called to tell her I might not survive the night, she chose to stay at a birthday party instead of being with her potentially dying mother. That decision revealed who she really is. Mrs. Hale, surely you can understand that people sometimes make poor choices under stress. The only person under stress that night was me, Mr. Webb. Emily was at a party eating birthday cake while her mother was fighting for her life. Then she spent the next year stealing from my bank accounts every time I was too sick or absent to notice. These weren't poor choices under stress. This was a pattern of calculated exploitation. But she's your daughter. Don't you want to show mercy? I showed mercy for 35 years, Mr. Webb. Mercy enabled Emily to become someone who could abandon her dying mother and steal from her systematically. Perhaps consequences will be more educational than mercy ever was. The next morning, I woke to find that Emily had somehow managed to post on social media from jail. Her Facebook status read, "Going through a difficult time due to family misunderstandings. Thank you to everyone who's reaching out with support. The truth will come out." Family misunderstandings. Even facing federal charges, Emily couldn't admit the truth about what she'd done. Within hours, the post had dozens of supportive comments from people who knew nothing about the systematic theft, the forged documents, or the night Emily chose birthday cake over her mother's deathbed. The narrative Emily was crafting portrayed her as the victim of an elderly mother's confusion and vindictiveness. But social media posts don't change FBI evidence logs. Public sympathy doesn't alter digital forensics. Emily could spin her story however she wanted. The facts would speak for themselves in court. Colin Anders called that afternoon with an update on Emily's bail hearing. Mrs. Hale, the judge set bail at $200,000. Given the systematic nature of the fraud and the flight risk assessment, he also ordered electronic monitoring if she makes bail. Will she be able to raise the money? Unlikely. She'd need to put up collateral worth $200,000, and given her financial situation, I don't think that's possible.
Good.
Emily would remain in custody, unable to interfere with witnesses, unable to access any remaining financial accounts, unable to commit additional crimes while awaiting trial. That evening, I received a handwritten letter from Emily, delivered through her attorney. The stationery was jail commissary paper, and her usually perfect handwriting looked shaky. "Mom, I know you're angry with me, and I understand why. I made mistakes, and I'm sorry. But please don't let this destroy our family forever. I love you, and I know you love me too. Can we please work this out like adults? Your daughter, Emily." I read the letter twice, then filed it with the rest of the evidence Colin and I had assembled. Even from jail, Emily couldn't acknowledge the truth about what she'd done. She still characterized 18 months of systematic theft and abandoning her dying mother as mistakes that could be worked out. Some people never learn. They just get better at manipulating the people around them. Emily was about to discover that federal prosecutors weren't as easily manipulated as the mother she'd been exploiting for years. The federal courthouse smelled like marble and justice, cold, clean, and utterly unforgiving. I sat in the gallery wearing my best navy suit and my grandmother's pearl necklace, the same pearls I'd worn to Emily's graduation, her wedding, every important moment of her life. Today would be her most important moment, and for the first time, I wasn't there to support her. Emily sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, her blonde hair pulled back in a prison-issued ponytail. The designer clothes and perfect makeup were gone, replaced by the stark reality of federal custody. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her circumstances. Her attorney, Marcus Webb, whispered urgently in her ear while shuffling through papers. Across the aisle, federal prosecutor Rachel Cooper arranged her evidence with the methodical precision of someone who'd never lost a case this strong. Judge William Hartley entered the courtroom with a kind of presence that made everyone sit straighter. He was a man in his 60s with steel-gray hair and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen every possible version of human greed and stupidity. "This is the case of United States versus Emily Hale," Judge Hartley announced. "The defendant stands charged with wire fraud, identity theft, elder financial abuse, and forgery." "How does the defendant plead?" Emily stood shakily. "Not guilty, Your Honor." The trial began with Rachel Cooper's opening statement, delivered with the clinical efficiency of a surgeon making the first incision. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about betrayal. The defendant, Emily Hale, systematically exploited her elderly mother's trust to steal over $15,000. When her access to those funds was cut off, she escalated to wire fraud using forged legal documents. Rachel walked to a chart showing the timeline of Emily's crimes. The evidence will show that Ms. Hale accessed her mother's accounts without authorization for 18 months. She timed these thefts to coincide with her mother's illness and absence. When her mother nearly died of a heart attack, Ms. Hale chose to attend a birthday party instead of going to the hospital. When her mother survived and discovered the theft, Ms. Hale attempted to steal more money using documents she knew were fraudulent. I watched the jury's faces as Rachel spoke. Their expressions ranged from confusion to disgust. The idea of stealing from your dying mother was so fundamentally reprehensible that even hardened jurors were visibly disturbed. Marcus Webb's opening statement was exactly what I'd expected, a desperate attempt to reframe criminal behavior as family dysfunction. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is a tragedy of family miscommunication. Emily Hale is a loving daughter who made poor financial decisions during a stressful time. She never intended to steal from her mother. She was helping with financial management and made mistakes in judgment." The first witness was Nurse Kelly Ramirez, who testified about the night of my heart attack with devastating precision. "I called Ms. Hale to inform her that her mother was in critical condition and might not survive the night," Kelly said.
MS.
"Hale told me she couldn't come to the hospital because she was attending her mother-in-law's birthday party and couldn't miss it for anything in the world." "Did you explain the severity of Mrs. Hale's condition?" Rachel asked. "I specifically told her that her mother might die that night. I made it clear that this could be her last opportunity to see her mother alive." "And how did Ms. Hale respond?" "She said the birthday party was more important and that she would visit the next day if her mother survived." The jury looked horrified. Several jurors glanced at Emily, who was staring at the table to avoid their eyes. Colin Anders took the stand next, walking the jury through 18 months of digital evidence with the patience of a teacher explaining arithmetic to children. The defendant accessed her mother's online banking accounts 47 times over an 18-month period, Colin testified. These accesses were timed to coincide with Mrs. Hale's hospitalizations, out-of-town trips, and periods when she was too ill to monitor her finances. "Can you give the jury a specific example?" Rachel asked. During Mrs. Hale's 3-day hospital stay for gallbladder surgery, the defendant made 5 unauthorized transfers totaling $2,800. The transfers were made to accounts controlled by the defendant and her husband. Did Mrs. Hale authorize these transfers?
No.
Mrs. Hale was unconscious under anesthesia when 3 of the transfers were made. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, digital forensics, witness testimony, everything pointed to systematic, calculated theft by a daughter who exploited her mother's medical vulnerability. When Emily took the stand in her own defense, I could see immediately that it was a mistake. Ms. Hale, Rachel began during cross-examination. On the night your mother had her heart attack, where were you? I was at my mother-in-law's birthday party. Did the hospital explain that your mother might not survive the night? Yes, but you chose to stay at the birthday party instead of going to see your potentially dying mother? It wasn't that simple. I had obligations. Miss Hale, what obligation could be more important than being with your mother during what might have been her last night alive? Emily's face flushed red. You don't understand. I couldn't just leave. You couldn't leave a birthday party to be with your dying mother? It would have been rude. The courtroom went completely silent. Emily had just admitted, under oath, that being rude to her mother-in-law was more important than being present for her mother's potential death. Ms. Hale, let's talk about the money you took from your mother's accounts. Did you have her permission? I knew she would want to help if I asked. That's not what I asked. Did you have her permission? Not explicitly, but... So you took her money without asking? I was going to pay it back. When? When were you going to pay back $15,000? Emily couldn't answer because we all knew she'd never intended to pay back anything. The closing arguments were anticlimactic. Rachel methodically reviewed the evidence while Marcus made one last desperate plea for mercy based on Emily's status as a first-time offender. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. On the charge of wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of identity theft, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of elder financial abuse, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of forgery, we find the defendant guilty. Emily collapsed in her chair, sobbing openly. Her perfect composure had finally cracked completely under the weight of consequences she'd never imagined she'd face. I felt nothing as I watched my daughter's life end in that courtroom. No satisfaction, no sadness, no regret. Just the quiet certainty that justice had been served. Some mothers would have rushed forward to comfort their convicted daughter. Some mothers would have promised to appeal, to fight, to never give up. But I wasn't some mothers. I gathered my purse, stood up, and walked out of the courtroom while Emily was still crying. The woman who'd abandoned me in my moment of greatest need had just learned what abandonment really meant. 3 months later, I returned to the same federal courthouse for Emily's sentencing hearing. The marble still smelled like justice, but this time I was there to witness the final chapter of my daughter's criminal career. Emily had lost weight during her time in custody. The orange jumpsuit hung loose on her frame, and her once perfect blonde hair hung limp and lifeless around her shoulders. Prison had stripped away all the superficial beauty that had allowed her to charm and manipulate her way through life. Judge Hartley reviewed the pre-sentence report with the methodical thoroughness that had made him one of the most respected federal judges in the district. Ms. Hale, you have been convicted of multiple serious crimes involving the systematic exploitation of your elderly mother. The court has reviewed your criminal history, or lack thereof, as well as the impact statements from the victim and the affected financial institutions. He paused, looking directly at Emily. The court has also reviewed your lack of genuine remorse. Throughout this process, you have characterized your crimes as mistakes and family misunderstandings. You have never acknowledged the calculated nature of your actions or taken full responsibility for the harm you've caused. Emily's attorneys stood to address the court. Your Honor, my client is a first-time offender and the mother of 2 young children. She has learned from this experience and is committed to making amends with her family. We ask for leniency in sentencing. Judge Hartley's expression didn't change. Mr. Webb, your client abandoned her dying mother to attend a birthday party, then spent 18 months systematically stealing from her during periods of medical vulnerability. When confronted with her crimes, she escalated to wire fraud using forged legal documents. This pattern of behavior demonstrates a profound moral failing that goes far beyond mistakes. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Hale, would you like to make a victim impact statement? I stood slowly. Every eye in the courtroom focused on me. I'd spent weeks preparing this statement, but in the end, the truth was simple. Your Honor, Emily is my only child. I raised her, educated her, loved her unconditionally for 35 years. When I nearly died of a heart attack, she chose to stay at a birthday party instead of being with me. That decision revealed who she truly is beneath the daughter I thought I'd raised. I looked directly at Emily, who was crying silently. The financial theft was painful, but the emotional abandonment was devastating. I spent my life teaching Emily about love, loyalty, and responsibility. She repaid that teaching by exploiting my vulnerability when I was most in need of protection. I turned back to Judge Hartley. Your Honor, I don't want revenge. I want accountability. Emily needs to understand that actions have consequences and that love without boundaries becomes enablement. For her sake and for society's sake, she needs to face the full weight of justice. Judge Hartley nodded gravely. Ms. Hale, please stand for sentencing. Emily struggled to her feet, her legs shaking visibly. On the charge of wire fraud, this court sentences you to 8 years in federal prison. On the charge of identity theft, 5 years to run concurrently. On the charge of elder financial abuse, 3 years to run concurrently. On the charge of forgery, 2 years to run concurrently. Emily's knees buckled, and her attorney had to steady her. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution in the amount of $18,347 to cover the stolen funds plus interest and investigative costs. You will serve 3 years of supervised probation following your release, during which time you are prohibited from accessing any financial accounts belonging to family members without express written permission. 8 years in federal prison. My daughter would be 43 when she was released, her children nearly adults, her life permanently marked by felony convictions. Furthermore, Judge Hartley continued, you are permanently enjoined from contacting the victim, Margaret Hale, through any means whatsoever. Any attempt to contact her directly or through third parties will result in additional criminal charges. Emily looked across the courtroom at me one last time. Her face was streaked with tears, her mouth moving as if she wanted to say something. But what was there to say? That she was sorry? That she'd learned her lesson? That she wanted her mother's forgiveness? I'd heard all of those promises before, usually when Emily wanted something from me. This time, I didn't need to hear them. The court had spoken, and justice had been served. As they led Emily away in shackles, I gathered my purse and walked toward the courthouse exit. In the hallway, I was approached by a young woman with a notebook, a reporter from the local newspaper. Mrs. Hale, how do you feel about your daughter's sentence? I paused, considering my words carefully. I feel that justice has been served. Actions have consequences, and today those consequences were imposed fairly and appropriately. Do you have any regrets about prosecuting your own daughter? My only regret is that I didn't recognize the pattern of exploitation sooner. Perhaps earlier intervention could have prevented Emily from escalating to federal crimes. Will you ever forgive her? I thought about that question as I walked to my car. Forgiveness was complicated. I could forgive Emily for being selfish, immature, and financially irresponsible. I could even forgive her for choosing a birthday party over my deathbed. But I couldn't forgive the systematic, calculated exploitation that had followed. I couldn't forgive 18 months of stealing from her sick, vulnerable mother. I couldn't forgive the wire fraud attempt that had demonstrated her complete lack of remorse or intention to change. Forgiveness and accountability aren't mutually exclusive, I told the reporter. Emily will have 8 years to consider whether she wants to become someone worthy of forgiveness. 2 years have passed since Emily's sentencing, and my life has never been more peaceful. I wake up each morning in my own home, secure in the knowledge that my bank accounts are safe, my medical decisions are my own, and my financial future is protected from exploitation. The house feels different now, lighter somehow, without the constant undercurrent of manipulation and hidden agendas. I've redecorated Emily's old bedroom, transforming it from a shrine to maternal devotion into a practical guest room for the friends who actually deserve my hospitality. I volunteer at the Literacy Center 3 days a week, teaching adult learners how to read financial documents and recognize predatory lending practices. There's something deeply satisfying about helping people protect themselves from the kind of exploitation I once endured. My garden has flourished without Emily's periodic raids on my time and energy. The roses bloom more abundantly, the vegetable garden produces enough for me to share with neighbors, and I've added a small greenhouse where I start seedlings for the community garden project. Thomas Greer calls periodically to update me on the legal protections we put in place. The trust documents remain ironclad, the no contest clause unchallenged, and my estate planning reflects my current values rather than my former illusions about family loyalty. Margaret, Thomas said during our last meeting, I have to tell you, I've never seen someone handle family betrayal with such surgical precision. You protected yourself completely while staying strictly within legal boundaries. Thomas, precision was necessary. Emotion would have created vulnerabilities that Emily could have exploited even from prison. Colin Anders sends quarterly reports showing that my financial accounts remain secure and properly monitored. The protection systems we implemented continue to function perfectly, alerting me to any unusual activity and maintaining the digital security that keeps opportunists at bay. Mrs. Hale, Colin told me recently, your case has become a template for our other clients dealing with family financial abuse. The methodical documentation and legal preparation created an airtight prosecution that sent a clear message to other potential exploiters. I receive updates about Emily through the federal prison system's victim notification program. She's housed in a minimum security facility in another state, participating in financial responsibility classes and working in the prison library. Her earliest possible release date is still 5 years away. David has filed for divorce, citing the impossible financial burden of Emily's restitution payments and the social stigma of being married to a convicted felon. The children live with his sister now, their college funds depleted by legal costs and the shame of their mother's crimes. Sometimes I wonder if Emily thinks about the night she chose birthday cake over her dying mother. Does she remember the casual cruelty in her voice when she told the nurse that a party was more important than her mother's life? Does she understand that single decision revealed who she truly was beneath 35 years of performance? I've been contacted by other elderly parents dealing with similar exploitation by their adult children. Word has spread through senior communities about the woman who successfully prosecuted her own daughter for elder abuse. They want advice, legal referrals, the courage to stop enabling criminal behavior disguised as family loyalty. How did you find the strength to do it, they ask. How did you prosecute your own child? The answer is always the same. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Love doesn't require you to enable criminal behavior. My new will reflects my current reality rather than my past hopes. The bulk of my estate funds scholarships for older women returning to education, domestic violence shelters, and programs that help seniors recognize and report financial abuse. The remaining assets support friends and charities that have earned my respect through action, not expectation. Last month, I received a letter forwarded through Emily's prison counselor. The envelope was addressed in Emily's handwriting, now shakier and less confident after 2 years of federal incarceration. I threw it away unopened. Whatever Emily wanted to say, apologies, explanations, requests for reconciliation, no longer mattered to me. The time for words had passed the night she chose a birthday party over her mother's deathbed. Everything since then had been documentation and consequence. Some stories end with forgiveness and reconciliation. Some stories end with families reunited and lessons learned. This story ends with an elderly woman sitting in her garden on a summer evening, reading a book about ancient Roman history and feeling perfectly content with her solitude. It ends with bank accounts that are secure, medical decisions that are her own, and a future that belongs entirely to her. It ends with justice served and peace reclaimed. The phone rings occasionally with calls from well-meaning friends who think I should reach out to Emily, who suggests that family is family and that I should consider forgiveness. I thank them for their concern and change the subject. They don't understand that forgiveness isn't always healing. Sometimes it's just another word for enabling. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a criminal is let them serve their sentence completely, without interference from the love that originally enabled their crimes. Emily had 35 years to earn my trust, respect, and devotion. She chose to exploit all three. Now she has 8 years to consider whether she wants to become someone worthy of redemption. I hope she uses that time wisely. But her redemption is no longer my responsibility. I water my roses and plan my evening meal, a woman finally free from the exhausting burden of loving someone more than they loved me. The sun sets over my garden with the quiet satisfaction of a day well lived and a future well protected. Some mothers never learn to let go. Some mothers enable criminal behavior until it destroys both the criminal and the victim. But I learned, eventually, that the greatest love is sometimes the refusal to rescue someone from the consequences of their choices. Emily wanted my money more than my life. Now she has neither. I have both my money and my life, finally my own after years of sharing them with someone who valued only one of the two. The garden needs watering, the book needs finishing, and tomorrow I'm teaching 3 new students how to read financial statements so they can protect themselves from the kind of exploitation I once endured. It's a good life, made better by the absence of people who confused love with access to bank accounts. Some stories end with reconciliation. This one ends with reclamation. The difference I've learned is that reconciliation requires both people to change. Reclamation only requires one person to be strong enough to stop giving away what they can't afford to lose.
chose réclamation.
It was the best choice I ever made. Margaret's story shows us something powerful. It's never too late to reclaim your life from people who exploit your love. If you're inspired by her courage to choose justice over enabling, I want you to know about a resource that can help you rebuild after betrayal. Our book, Reclaiming Your Peace After Pain, offers practical steps for healing from family trauma and setting boundaries that protect your future. Click the link in the description to start your own journey of reclamation. Like this video if Margaret's story resonates with you. Subscribe for more stories of people who refuse to be victims of family exploitation. And hit that notification bell because everyone deserves to know that love without boundaries isn't love, it's enablement. Margaret chose justice over sentiment, and her life became her own again. Your life can be your own too.